Grief is something that we will all experience in life. Grief changes shape, but it never ends. So joining me today is Leslie Weirich, who is the author of The Gifts of Grief, which is a moving exploration of finding meaning and solace in the face of heartfelt tragedy and loss, and offering hope and comfort to those on a similar journey. Good morning.
Good morning, Jessica.
How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm so interested in diving into your story, learning about your book and what you have coming up here in Fort Wayne. But let's start from the top. You have experienced loss in your life, a series of loss in your life, and you have hit a point where you want to use that as a passion and a tool to help others. So tell me more about your story.
Well, Jessica, you know, grief has kind of been my middle name, I say. I started grieving when I was 16 years old. I found out that I was losing my oldest brother to cancer, and he would die when I was 21. I'll be 65 this year.
Wow.
So in the last 47 years, I have lost multiple siblings, 3 siblings to cancer. My beloved parents lived long lives. I lost them at 89 and 91. So also lost 2 infant daughters. And then in 2016, I lost my 20-year-old son to suicide. And I also lost my best friend of over 30 years in 2018 to a rare heart defect. So through the series of those losses, you know, I've learned a lot. And I've had many, many people ask me, you know, would I consider writing a book about my story? So a dear friend said, I think you need to do it before you're 65, Leslie. And I said, well, that birthday's coming around. So my book launched on Amazon January the 5th, which would have been my son's 28th birthday. We launched the book in his honor, in his memory. Yeah.
And so as you have experienced all of that grief, what has been some of the biggest lessons and takeaways you've had to process and accept along this journey?
Well, I think one of the things I would say to everyone is grief is unique. No 2 people grieve the same way because, you know, your loss is different based on the relationship that you had with that person. The grief over my infant daughters was different than the grief over my son who was 20. But what I do tell everybody is you cannot fast forward grief. You know, we live in a culture that wants to do everything quickly. And we also live in a culture that's very uncomfortable with grief. But the beauty of grief is, and I love when Brene Brown says, grief needs to be held to be healed. And what I want to let everybody know, especially people that live in our community, is we have an amazing community-wide grief center, the Peggy F. Murphy Grief Center. So don't grieve alone. Make sure that you connect with other people who can understand your grief and go through what you're going through with you. Because what grief really teaches you is if you don't push it down, if you allow yourself to grieve, on the other side, you're not going to believe the resilience that you found in your life through feeling your grief and not trying to push it aside.
Yeah, that process that has to, you have to give yourself space and give yourself grace. To go through it. And also, as you said, grief should not be handled alone. If you have a friend or family member that has lost someone, what are some tips that you have for the support system? How can people show up for them while being sensitive but want to be there but not wanting to make it worse?
Well, I think that's a great question. One of the things I tell everybody is don't wait until you know the perfect thing to say, or just show up. You don't need to say anything. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but show up anyway. Someone had written a beautiful post on LinkedIn not long ago, and they called it Grief Groceries. And so they knew this family had lost a child, and so they went to the grocery and bought all this stuff that the kids would like to eat, literally just put it on the front porch. So action, you know, don't wait, don't feel awkward like I'm going to wait for someone else to do it. You do it, you show up. If you know someone lost someone and their yard needs mowed, get over there and mow it. Don't ask. Don't ask a grieving person, let me know if you need anything, because a grieving person can't tell you what they need. Just show up and think about the practical things that need to be done and just do them. And don't worry about the perfect words because there aren't any.
Right. Oh, that's so good. So good. And so The Gifts of Grief, your book, is really just a journey of what you have lived and learned and experienced. So tell us a little synopsis about your book.
Okay. The Gifts of Grief is about my personal journey of losing multiple people in my life, siblings, children, my parents, and each chapter is dedicated to one of those people, what I learned from their life, and how their death prepared me for what was to come. So we call it post-traumatic growth. And then in the final chapter, because we had lost our son 7 years ago to suicide, he was a college football player. In the final chapter, it's called Leslie's Hope, which is my speaking organization, and I now speak all over the nation to our military and young men. And so I talk about, you know, I think Viola Davis had a beautiful quote that said, "They say to serve is to love, but I think to serve is to heal." And so in my life and in these chapters, I talk about how what pulled me out of my grief was serving others. And I tell anybody, if you're having the worst day in the world, get out of your house, go somewhere, be around people, do something for someone else, and you won't believe how that'll pull you out of your own grief and heal your heart too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. My dad says the same thing. He does.
Your dad's a wise man.
Yes, he is. And so you will have your book signing here in Fort Wayne tomorrow. So please share information about where people can go and be able to meet you.
Absolutely. It'll be at the Peggy F. Murphy Community Grief Center, which is on Homestead Road. It's going to be open to the public from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. I'll be reading some excerpts out of different chapters in my book. We'll be talking about a lot of the people that are coming, and you do need to register for parking and for seating, but it is a free event. And I know a lot of people that have signed up have either recently lost someone or lost someone within the last few years, and we're going to hold each other's grief and give each other a sacred space there to talk about things and just answer questions. And so it's going to be a really, I think, a beautiful event. And if you haven't visited that grief center, you need to go and just do a tour. It's just a beautiful resource for our community.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And last thing, Leslie, suicide is on the rise in our country. It's affecting our kids and our community in such a heavy way. And so from being a parent who has lost a child, is there any words of hope and encouragement that you can give right now to a parent that is watching, that may have lost their child and may harbor some type of resentment or self-blame for the incident? Can you give some freeing words right now?
I dedicated a couple pages in my book to that. I actually wrote that openly to parents and to anyone who's lost someone to suicide. I say suicide's the only type of death where we focus on how someone died more than how they lived and who they were. Your child did not take their life because of something you did or didn't do. And I know that's a hard thing for parents to hear. And because I said, you know, kids can come from the most engaged, loving homes and still die by suicide. Our son was the president of his freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior class. Scholar athlete all 4 years in a row. But the young brain is very impulsive, and I know we're losing a lot of young men. So one of the things I think it's really important for parents and everyone in the community to understand the power of mentorship, to make sure that young people growing up have mentors in their lives. And I could talk about this and do another segment on the power of mentorship. So there's a lot of great programs in Fort Wayne where you can sign up and be mentors, because our statistics are telling us if a young person gets engaged with a mentor, say middle school or high school, they're 80% less likely to develop a drug or alcohol problem in their life. And over 50% of suicides involve drugs and alcohol. So please forgive yourself. And if you are a parent who's lost a child to suicide, please come on Friday, reach out to me. I want to give you a hug. And there's a couple pages in there just for you, because you did the best you could with the resources that you had at that time. And if love could have kept them here, they would have lived forever.
Oh, so lovely. So nice to meet you,
Nice
Leslie.
meeting you, Jessica.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And if you would like more information about the Gifts of Grief book signing, we'll have that information listed below, and we'll be right back.